This week we've got Joel Turner from Shot IQ on the podcast. I'm sure Joel does not need any introduction to most of you. His shot process and shot teaching has kind of been all over the place. He's pretty active on Instagram. He's taught some of the best archers out there. Obviously, his son Bodie is arguably one of the best tournament archers out there. This was a great conversation. So Joel's been asked to work with a lot of people outside of archery. So we had some of our conversation around an experience that he had working with the entire pitching staff for the Philadelphia Phillies. And one of the things that I thought was great about this conversation is it wasn't just about archery or about shooting. It was about understanding the mental aspect of it and how you could actually potentially apply that in your own life outside of shooting. So if you're coaching your kids in sports, we had some conversation around the way that you'd focus on helping them through the process of learning and mastering whatever they're doing in a different sport, whether you're working with them in the yard or whether you're working with them on the field somewhere else, and taking this teaching progression and not only applying it to your ability to be better as an archer and a shooter, but also to help somebody in your family, to help, whether it's a niece or a nephew that's working on a sport, and for you to become a coach that actually can help people you care about. So we had a great conversation. Obviously, we also spent a lot of time talking about mastering the shooting process. We did spend some time talking about the development of the Stan OnneX clicker and how that came to be, how you actually utilize that outside of a regular thumb button. So some pretty good conversation around some wide-ranging topics. We didn't just focus on the neurology and a lot of the stuff that you hear in some of the other podcasts. It was a little bit of a wider spread, so I think you're going to enjoy it. I appreciate you being here. I know you can spend your time on a lot of podcasts, so it matters to me that you're here. If you have time, if you are on Spotify or Apple, please leave me a review, just a couple comments, and give me a 5-star. And if you're over on YouTube, subscribe, like, and share it. It helps the podcast a ton. I really appreciate y'all. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the podcast with Joel. Joel Turner, thanks for being here, brother.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good stuff. We were just literally talking. I'm like, I'm going to hit the record button because we started talking about, I coached football for 30 years. You've been coaching all this stuff forever. You're like, I got questions for you. I'm like, I got questions for you. Probably not, man. Probably not a lot of that. Like, I mean, I want you to go wherever you want to go with it, but I'm probably going to ask you some questions that are like a little bit different. Like, I know you get interviewed a lot. So, and everyone, or if anybody knows anything about you, they've heard the whole shot process, and I want to work that into the conversation. But one of the things that it was interesting to me is, so you talk a lot about control, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things I want to know, just kind of, what's something outside of archery that you've struggled with control around, and how did you handle it?
Well, I mean, just my whole life has revolved around shooting, not necessarily archery, but just shooting and coaching shooters. And so but now I'm branching out on all this other stuff because everybody's coming to me, or a lot of people are coming to me with issues and like, hey, how do you use what you do at Shot IQ for my problem?
Like, who's coming? Like, what kind of people, or what kind of professionals or whatever?
So once I got on the Joe Rogan podcast, evidently I became an expert in everything.
I think that happens. Isn't that kind of part? Isn't that like part of the once you go through it? Yeah.
And up to that point, everything was about shooting, archery, firearms, sniper work, whatever it was. It was all based around shooting because that's what I do. That's my life. So once I got on the Rogan podcast, so I had all these people call me. Like, I had professional bowlers. I had the French Olympic decathlon coach call me.
Really?
Yeah. And so and I've given this example in numerous podcasts before, but it's a great example because it is. So I'm like, hey, coach, what's the problem? And I didn't even know that there was 10 different disciplines in the decathlon. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that shows my level of ignorance, I guess. And I said, give me the biggest problem, coach. He's like, well, my biggest problem is with my long jumpers. He said, when my long jumpers are running down the lane, right before they put their foot on the launch board, they involuntarily put their shoulders back, which kills the momentum of the jump. And I'm like, who knew?
Oh, the wheels are turning though already. I mean, I can see it.
So,
there's a very close comparison to what you're already doing, right?
Right. So I'm like, okay, well, we got to plug this into the mental game equation. And I didn't have the mental game equation until after the Rogan podcast, when these people started talking to me. And I'm like, man, I got to figure out like this ubiquitous, encompassing solution to their problems. And we all talk about the mental game all the time, but I'd never heard a definition of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a very smart person I was working with, Blake Brinker, he said, can you define the mental game? And I'm like, give me a second. So I had to kind of dive into what we do at Shot IQ.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, here's the definition of the mental game. It's understanding where, when, and how to direct your conscious mind into a specific task at a specific moment. And so once we came up with that definition, I took the Olympic decathlon coach. I'm like, okay, let's plug it into the equation. Where do you want your long jumper's conscious mind? And he said, I want it in the longest jump possible. I said, that's not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is in the shoulders. So now we know the where of the equation, right? Where do you want their conscious mind? In their shoulders. When do you want it there? And he gave me the answer to that already, right? Right
their
before
foot hits
they
the
put
line,
their foot
right?
on the launch board.
Okay.
They got to put their conscious mind on their shoulders to keep them forward. But how do you do that? How do you put your conscious mind in a specific place at a specific time? And that's kind of always what we've done at Shot IQ.
Yeah.
And then really diving into it, the how of the mental game equation is always speech. Speech is what moves thoughts from the limbic system of the brain to the prefrontal cortex, where thinking can occur, right? Thoughts are not thinking. Thoughts are what you hear. Thinking is what you say. So as the long jumpers running down the lane, right before they put their foot on the launch board, they say something about their shoulders. They may say shoulders. They may say forward, whatever. They're putting their conscious mind in the problem area at a very specific moment of truth. How are they doing that? It's through speech. And he said, well, I've never heard that before. I'm like, well, how many sports psychologists have you talked to? He's like, dozens. I mean, the guy had been an Olympic level coach for 20 years.
Yeah.
And he said, I've never heard this before. I'm like, man, I don't know what to tell you, but you owe me a lot of money. But now it's just this mental game equation. You just take whatever problem you're dealing with and just plug it in. Where do you want your conscious mind? When do you need it there? And how do you put it there? And it's just been phenomenal. That's how I've been able to go to these different, like the Philadelphia Phillies and, all over the place. I'm doing a speaking engagement for a sales team. They sell industrial printers. I don't know anything about industrial printers, but I know that their corporation has problems within it. So all I do when I go to these places is I have the executive or whatever tell me what problems they're having, and then we plug them into the mental game equation.
So was the shoulders was that their Here I Go, or was that before that?
No, like Here I Go is where, like, if you're talking about it in a shot process
Sure,
or
yeah.
in any process, Here I Go is a decision that you make to concentrate. But in like long jumping or golf or anything like that, the movements are open loop. They're supposed to be smooth and fluid and not be able to gain feedback within them. And some of those movements have to remain that way, like the foreswing in golf. If you talk about something, some correction in the foreswing, you will alter the motor program. It's not going to hit the ball the same. So Here I Go is a decision that readies the mind to concentrate. So you got to be careful, because if you have these Here I Go moments in the wrong place in your movement, you will alter the motor program that you're trying to keep automatic. That's why shooting is so much different than everything else, because it's Here I Go is a very specific moment. You draw back and aim, then you address the trigger, then Here I Go that readies the mind, increases your presence. Then you talk yourself through a pressure increase. But the pressure increase in archery or firearms in precision work is closed loop. It's slow enough you could stop it anywhere within it. Slow enough you can gain feedback within it.
So how do you plug that process into more of an open loop situation, like that long jumper or like golf or something like that? How do you break that down and then use that to help somebody improve?
So it just depends on what the movement is. Like if you're dealing with golf, the takeaway or the backswing can be closed loop. That's where you're gaining all the feedback. You're making sure all the pressures are right, all the tensions are in the right direction. But once you're at the top of that, that's where you could say, here I go, or that's where you shift your conscious mind into vision, because that's the governing body, and that keeps it out of the movement. So it's two completely different things, right? You got to figure out whether the movement's open loop or closed loop, or, just what the problem is, as far as like if it's some cerebral problem like anxiety attacks or whatever. Like if you put it in football, like why do wide receivers miss the football?
You're asking me that question?
I'm asking you that question. Why do wide receivers miss? You can see it every time on the TV screen.
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer is they look away from the football. They look upfield before the ball hits their hands. They're not looking the ball into their hands. They're not, catching the tip of the football.
So plug that into the mental game equation. Where do you need the wide receiver's conscious mind?
On the catch, on the ball into the catch.
Okay. Either one, ball, the catch, whatever.
Right.
When do you need it there?
I mean, obviously at the time of the catch, but you need it there as the ball is, traveling towards them, right, and the ball is approaching them.
As soon as they observe that pass is coming to me,
exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we know the where, we know the when. How do they keep their conscious mind in the catch or the ball, knowing that they're about to get smashed?
Their thinking.
Their speech,
right? Their speech, so the words, the things that they're telling themselves.
Right. So thinking is speech.
Right. Not
so
their
how
thoughts.
Do you keep them from keeping their eyes off of downfield? You have to keep it in the catch. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Through speech.
Talk yourself through the catch.
And that's what they don't do. Like, how often did you, as a coach, as a football coach, how often did you have your players, if they were having a particular problem or doing a particular movement, how often did you have them say it out loud?
Not a ton. I mean, the one thing I didn't know, like I didn't have all this stuff broken down like mentally and, like you do through neuroscience and all those things. But when I was teaching it to kids, especially, high school kids, if they were younger, I would actually have them say, like, when I was the big, and I was a line coach, so the big three things that we always, like, I got them in a stance to begin with, and then we always focused on the first two steps, the power step and the follow-up step. And I actually made them say stance, step, because it got them to the point where they were actually thinking about each, of those three things, because they couldn't do anything if they couldn't do those things.
Right. So you did it. That's using speech to direct the conscious mind into a specific task at a specific moment. And then, so that's in the cognitive stage of learning. And then they practice, right? And they practice to make that automatic. But it's when you noticed a problem as the coach, that's when you got to go back to the out loud, the commentary skill building, if you will. Because
that makes a lot of sense.
These wide receivers, they're so good, they're so talented, but they all look away. They all miss sometimes. And every time they miss, you can see it. You can see them look away from the ball.
Oh, yeah. That's the biggest problem that you ever have with a receiver is they're thinking about getting upfield. They're thinking about making the move after the catch. Sometimes it's not even about getting hit. It's like they're thinking about, what am I doing after the ball hits my hands? Like, what move am I going to make? How am I going to get to the sideline? Whatever.
Yep. And those are all things that need to come. Those are all mental games that need to be played after you catch the ball. Mm-hmm. So keeping it in that one mental game of catching the ball, that's paramount. That's first. Then you can take your eyes away from the ball and find your path and all those things, right?
Yeah.
But you take a wide receiver like, I don't know, a 5-year NFL player, and you're going to ask them to say out loud, ball, as it's coming to them.
There's a lot of ego
some of them
in there.
Would do it, but it's public humiliation. It's public speaking. So they're not going to want to do that. But that is the fastest route to get the conscious mind back where it needs to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's completely true. That makes a ton of sense. I mean, we used to run into that all the time. And a lot of it was just because of those were some of your most talented athletes. Those were the kids that have always been able to do everything just naturally, without, and obviously they've been coached, but they rely on skill, and they've done a lot of things on skill their whole life just because of their athleticism. So,
but when they were first learning, usually this seems to be the case in a lot of sports. When they're first learning, they're learning the physicality of it, and not the mentality. You were teaching them when you had them say stance, step, step. You were teaching them the mentality, but they weren't picking that up. They're picking that up. They're only picking up the physicality of it. Okay, I got to get my stance. And I step, and I step. Okay, I'm just going to do that over and over and over again, right? But because they never blueprinted how they did it, they become so efficient that if step isn't natural, they will always go toward the path of nature. Like a wide receiver taking their eyes off the ball because they're about to get smashed by a linebacker or whatever. That's completely natural.
Sure, that's self-preservation.
So for them to override the central nervous system, the only way that I know to do it, and I'm not a doctor, obviously, but is speech. It all comes down to speaking about it. So, but we'll all go toward the path of efficiency, and that's what happens in shooting, is people get the physicality of shooting and they never realize the mentality of it. How did they do it? When you ask that question, how did I do that? How did I catch that ball that time? You got to realize what you said and when you said it. That's how you blueprint the mentality of something. That's how you blueprint the mental game so that you can play it again and again and again. That makes sense?
Yeah. So let's say and I'm just trying to, from a practical standpoint, let's say you're a dad listening to this, right? And you've got a kid that's learning football and you're working with at home in the backyard, that kind of thing. How are you telling them to teach that to their kid, right? If you say it out loud, that's one thing. But like you said, you're teaching them the physicality. So how do you relay that to a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid that's working on some kind of a skill in the backyard?
You give that 15-year-old, you give them the mental skills. So you give them what to say and when to say it, which you did with the stance, step, step. That's what you did, right? And then they have to teach you out loud, because that gives you, as the dad or the coach or whatever, that gives you the direct link to their conscious mind. Where are they putting their conscious mind, and when are they putting it there? And if you know as the coach when they should be doing a certain thing, but they're not saying it, then you know that they're not putting their conscious mind in the right place at the right time.
That makes a lot of sense.
So dads or whatever, have your kids speaking out loud. And it's easier from student to coach than it is from kid to dad, obviously, because dads don't know anything about anything, really. I mean, according to Bodie, I don't know if I've ever even shot a bow, but so
how soon they forget, right?
That's the way it's supposed to be. Like 15, 18-year-old males and females are not supposed to listen to their parents. They're supposed to go out to the next tribe over and learn from them. That's how they're supposed to spread genes and all that stuff, right? That's biology. So don't get too wrapped around the axle if your kid doesn't want to do it. But when they're being coached by somebody else, they got to be able to speak like they are teaching. Like, I'll give you an example in a shooting example.
Yeah.
Like, so commentary shooting is what we call it. So you'd be commentary football, commentary golfing, whatever it may be. It's commentary, it's out loud, so you get the direct link. So in an archery shot, if I was teaching a commentary shot, it would sound like this. Okay, I'm drawing back and aiming. Okay, got the pin in the middle. That looks good. That's as good as it's going to get. Okay, now I'm going to put my finger on the trigger, a little bit of pressure, not too much. Okay, yeah, that feels good. Okay, now I'm going to increase my presence by saying, here I go. Here I go. And now I'm going to talk myself through a pressure increase. Okay, a little bit. Easy now. Yeah, that's it. Stay in that. That's good. Squeeze. Boom, until the shot breaks. And that's like, you don't get to stop talking until the shot breaks. And you don't get to stop doing commentary skill building until the conversation becomes easy. Until you truly understand what you say and when you say it. Therefore, you know how you do what you do.
That's interesting. So I haven't heard you say the conversational thing before. I've heard the other part, and that's my process. I use your process. I've got, a set of steps that I go through. I actually say it out loud, but I've got like a word, right, that I say for every step. But I hadn't heard you say the conversational piece. What's the advantage to that over, having, just a single word like, okay, draw, anchor, aim, that kind of step, right?
So that's not how you would teach somebody else, right? You will eventually get to that where it's a single word.
Okay.
But when you're doing commentary skill building, you're talking yourself into a movement, into a pressure increase that causes an explosion that requires a conscious override of the central nervous system. You wouldn't just say one word to do that. You wouldn't just like squeeze. If you were teaching somebody else, you would not just say, okay, now I'm going to say squeeze. It's a little bit easy now. It's like you're talking to somebody with the same problem.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Teach yourself the way you would teach somebody else.
Right. And so it's like you're talking to somebody with the same problem, and they finally start to do it correctly. So there's affirmations. They're like, yeah, that's it. Okay, a little bit. Stay in that. I use stay in that a lot, right? Stay in that. Okay, now here we go. Squeeze. That's how you would talk somebody into doing some really fine, minute motor skill, right? Like say you're threading a needle and you just keep missing it, right? And you just keep missing the needle. And so just talk like you're talking. Okay, come on now. Easy now. Okay, a little bit. Yeah, that's good. All right. Yeah, keep going, right? That's how you talk. That's how you teach somebody to do something. So yes, it will eventually turn into a single word or a single phrase. Maybe it's a word that you stretch like squeeze, but you have to get the movement going. In shooting, you have to get the pressure increase started. And you start that with easy speech, just like you're trying to set cruise control at 10 miles an hour, right? You got to be real easy on the gas. Speedometer starts to come up. You hit 10 miles an hour. Like, okay, there it is. Stay in that, right? Like if you're teaching a kid to drive a manual transmission, right? I mean, you can't just say, dump the clutch. It's got to be like, okay, come on now, ease it out. There you go, right? That's how we teach. So that's the skill building in commentary shooting or commentary skill building out loud so that the coach has a direct link to what's going on in your conscious mind.
That makes a ton of sense. So let me ask you this question. This is more of just a kind of a straight technique thing, but one of the things that I've heard people talk about struggling with, one of the things that I think I'm getting better at, that I felt like I've struggled with as, a fairly new to bow hunting and to archery, is getting a consistent anchor point and knowing what that actually feels like every time. Can you talk a little bit about how, from a technique standpoint, people can solidify that better and recognize when they're in the same place over and over?
So are you, like, what system are you shooting? You shooting a compound with peeps and sights and all that stuff, or what?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a nose button or no?
I do.
Okay. So an anchor point is not as important as you may think, because as long as your peep is lined up with your eye, it doesn't necessarily have to be connected to your face. So, we like anchor points to be super consistent and such, but as long as you're not, the physicality, as long as you're not moving the nock anywhere, like you could be completely off of it, like the string's way out here and you got your head tilted and you're looking through the peep sight. As long as you address the trigger and you had a surprise break shot, your anchor point is not that important. As long as you're not seeing a shift in your eye. So when you're getting anchor points, nose buttons help. Wherever your index finger, like if I'm shooting a thumb button, I will split my jawbone with the split of the release. If I'm shooting a thumb button or a hinge, I'll use that angle, and that puts everything in the right angle. So I've got free movement of my fingers as well. There's all kinds of, it depends on what kind of draw length you like, the axle of your bow. But the main thing is that you're not moving the nock and you're keeping your eye consistent through the peep sight. And you're centering the housing of the sight. So, are you getting, when you say that you have this inconsistency?
Well, I think I'm neurotic. To be honest with you, I'm probably a little neurotic about it. I'm very, I'm just being honest. I'm just being transparent, right? I as somebody who was a coach forever, I break things down to very little pieces, and I think that's one of those things I've just never, being someone who hasn't done this for 30 years, that I hear people talk about all the time how important the anchor point is, and so I'm constantly, okay, am I in the same place? Does that feel exactly right? Because I feel like if I don't hit the same anchor point every time, it will significantly impact my accuracy. But from what you're saying, not so much true.
The anchor point is more to get your eye behind the peep.
Yeah, which I don't have a problem with that.
Right. I feel so you have a rear sight that's in your string. So your anchor is not as important as it would be for, say, a traditional archer where their anchor is their rear sight.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you're shooting a recurve or a longbow. So as long as you're getting your face behind the string, you're not getting a bunch of knot contact, and you're not seeing, one time you got your, if you're not looking at it like this one time or like this one time or at the top or whatever, right? So just center the housing, the pin's in the middle of it, and that's how visual proprioception works. It centers up things like that.
So that's a good transition to talk a little bit about. I've heard you talk a lot about the fact that people spend too much time aiming, right? Too much time in the aim phase of the shot. And I've heard you talk about, when you watch Bodie shoot, he's like, he works right through that pretty quick, and he just kind of keeps the whole thing moving. Can you talk a little bit more about why that's a problem, to just kind of get lost in the aim and to get stuck there?
Well, so visual proprioception is the science of the eye and how it works and how it centers things with a visual feedback system. So people are spending way too much time trying to be steady and perfect their aim. It's always coming back to the middle, whether you like it or not. So, but when you put too much emphasis on the aim and you put your consciousness into the aim by talking to it, like, okay, I'm drawing back and aiming. Okay, pin's in the middle. Gosh, that thing is shaking all over the place. Man, come on, get on there, right? And you're just wasting time.
Don't you feel like a lot of people right there go open loop?
Yeah, that's
right. That's when their mind just takes over.
Right.
Their thoughts take over.
As soon as you put consciousness to your aim and you allow the subconscious to then run the rest of the shot, it will always go the most efficient route, and it's there to keep you safe. It's not there to shoot an accurate shot. It's going to punch the trigger. It's going to go open loop on the trigger, which will link pre-ignition movements to the trigger motor program. You will flinch. You will grab your bow. You'll have a micro collapse. Who knows what you'll do, but it will do something. There will be some movement that is linked to the trigger motor program. And your subconscious sees it as a win because it got to brace you for the impact of the bow. So, that's just why you have to keep yourself. It's okay to put your consciousness into the aim to begin with, just to set the aim, but then you instantly pull it out of there because then you got to address the trigger. And then you ready the mind with here I go. And then you've got the super hard task of getting loud with the right words at the right moments, right? To talk yourself through that pressure increase. That's when you got to get loud.
So when you are coaching somebody and they're kind of stuck in that aim, and then they say to you, well, what am I supposed to pay attention to as I move through that? Do you just tell them to keep looking at the picture and not focus so much on the pin or the target, but just keep the whole picture in your mind and just move past it?
I have them look at it like a picture. So both the pin and the target are fairly clear enough that they can center on one another. And then I have them talk about it. Like, okay, that's as good as it's going to get. Okay, I'm stepping away from the aim now, right?
I love that.
Actually talking about it to step away from it. I used to say, just putting your finger on the trigger is the mechanical signal that you are now done aiming. But people would still put their finger on the trigger, but stay in the aiming room, right?
Yep.
Get yourself out verbally. Say something about it. Oh, man, I'm shaking like crazy. I don't care. I'm getting out of the room, right? Whatever you need to say, get yourself out of there. Now I'm just addressing the trigger. Okay, I got my finger on. Okay, good. Here I go. And then you start talking through that pressure increase.
Yep. Do you find that there's certain types of people that struggle more with this than other types?
Absolutely. Yeah. Analytical minds have a real hard time letting go of the aim. Like engineers, sometimes construction workers that are having to measure stuff all the time. So if you are trying to control this thing that you can't control and you have an analytical mind, that is you have to just, all it means is you have to get louder to step out of it. Like it has to be a step, you talking yourself out of the aim.
So artists are good at this. the people who are like more kind of free floating with their thought process, like those people tend to be better.
Yep. And females are way better at this than males are.
I believe that completely.
Yep. Because they're not trying to control it. They're just like, okay, I'm just going to do that. You tell me to put my pin in the middle. Okay, it's there.
Now What do I do?
Now put your finger on the trigger, right? Okay, cool. Got that done, right? Females are so much better at shooting than males are.
Have you ever seen any kind of relation between trauma, PTSD, anything like that? Does that ever, like, do those people tend to do better, worse? Does not really matter? Like any kind of link in there in terms of people's ability to kind of get through this process or be good at it?
So folks that are dealing with high anxiety issues
in general,
they have to learn how to get loud in their head, because a lot of them don't realize that is the actual skill. The skill is not hitting the X. The skill is not even shooting the bow. The ultimate skill of the human being is the ability to get loud in your head with the right words at the right moments. That's how we get through everything. That's how they've gotten themselves through whatever PTSD or anxiety attacks up to this point in their life. That's how they've done it, but maybe they haven't realized it yet. So the beautiful thing about shooting, or especially archery, is it's the tippy top of human concentration. So, I mean, you're literally overriding your own central nervous system through the use of words. And when you master that, and you start to use archery, I don't go shoot my bow. I go use my bow to practice getting loud with the right words at the right moments. I'll go shoot on one foot. I'll go do a cold plunge and then get out and shoot my bow. I will do exercise and then I will shoot my bow when I'm super shaky, whatever, right? I'm using adversity to practice the ultimate skill of getting loud with the right words at the right moments.
Hey guys, big thanks to AIO Gear for supporting the show. AIO is built specifically for bow hunters. Every stitch, zipper, and fabric choice is made to perform when it's quiet and the pressure's on. Their camo patterns are inspired by nature's predators, and they're purpose-built to ensure you blend naturally into the specific environment you are hunting. Make sure to use the code DONOTGO20 to get 20% off on your purchases at AIOgear.com. AIO is made for bow hunters by bow hunters. So give them a check. They're a big supporter of the podcast, and we appreciate them. Great gear. So when you say that, the ultimate skill is the ability to get loud in your own head with the right words at the right moments. Is there an example of something that the average person does that when they might do that, but they don't even really recognize that they're doing it, so that they could kind of say, okay, this is a situation where I do that. I didn't even know that's what I was doing.
Sure.
What does that look like in an average person's life?
As simple as getting out of bed every day. First thing we do, first mental game we have to play is to get out of bed, right? Thoughts aren't thinking. Thoughts are what hit the snooze bar again. Thinking is what gets your leg out from underneath the covers into the cold.
Gets
right?
you in the gym at 5 a.m.
Right. And then going to the gym, whatever. How do you do that? How do you get yourself to go to the gym every day? You don't just lollygag down to the gym with, your thoughts are, man, this sucks. I'm not going to do that. But you don't have control of thought volume. You have control of thinking volume.
Right.
So you're like, man, I don't want to go to the gym today. But then thinking is, if I don't, I'm going to feel like crap or whatever it is, right? That's thinking. Thinking and thoughts, not the same thing. Thoughts have no instruction. Thoughts have no strategy, right? So I don't want to go to the gym today has no instruction. It has no strategy.
That's
Come on,
a thought.
man. Pull up your bootstraps. We got to get there. We got to get this done. That is thinking. It has instruction and strategy to it. So we do it. I mean, literally getting loud with the right words at the right moments is how we all get through literally everything. And if we understand that that's the ultimate skill, now we start to use things to practice it, right? We start to see adversity as an opportunity to practice getting loud. Because the more you can get loud with the right words at the right moments, and you get those right words and right moments through experience, if you blueprint them, or you just go through life not knowing how you do what you do, right? So you start to use everything that you can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what do you think? I mean, you've got a very distinct process. There's so much information out there on the internet, on YouTube, on Instagram, whatever. What's like the biggest, I don't want to say myth, but what's the biggest thing that people are talking a lot about right now that you think is actually potentially hurting shooters versus helping them?
Well, the instruction that's been around for decades of subconscious shot activation and conscious aiming, that has been around for decades, about how you're supposed to let the subconscious just do its thing, trust the process, all the, blank bail until it becomes automatic. All these things that are out there are 100% against how we do what we do. The old way of teaching where you're allowing your subconscious to take over, what you have to realize is that it has a plan. Its plan is to keep you safe. It's not going to allow you to cause your body impact as a surprise. So and there's still people hanging on to that. And that's, they can hang on to it all they want. But when, if they're punching a trigger or maybe they're a command shooter or whatever, you just have to ask them, like, would you train a new person in your shot right now? And they usually say no. I'm like, okay, well, then you're admitting that there's maybe a better way of doing business. Not that they need to change or anything like that, but there is, the science of it is, if you don't have any pre-ignition movements linked to your trigger motor program, then the arrow can be launched with no pre-ignition movements. And that's a good thing usually. So
have you ever worked with somebody that just basically said, this is too rigid. Like, I'm instinctive. That's how I shoot. This just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I've had, and that's the key phrase. This doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you are correct. It doesn't work for anybody. It's not about working for you, because the subconscious, like I said, has a plan, right? So you can't take instruction hoping something works for you, because in shooting, nothing works for you. You're literally having to consciously override everything. So that's the phrase that usually comes out. They say, man, this just isn't working for me. I'm like, well,
yeah.
It doesn't work for anybody, right? It doesn't work for you. You got to work for it. So I don't teach people, things that work. I just teach them what work needs to be done and how to do the work. The rest is up to them. And yeah, some people say that, oh, you're taking the fun out of archery. I'm like, man, I think it's fun hitting the middle, but whatever. So
there's some similarities to that, because it's, to kind of go back to the analogy that we were using earlier with like a wide receiver or a really good athlete in football, it's sometimes hard to teach those guys technique because they've done everything naturally. And I would imagine that it's probably very similar with shooters, especially if you've got a shooter who, at one point or another was really good, and is still pretty good, but is struggling with something. They've basically taught themselves their entire life, to do something through instinct or whatever word you want to use.
And that's okay, right? Like if that person's a phenomenal athlete and they continue to be a phenomenal athlete, that's all good. Live your life, do your thing. But at some point, somebody's going to ask you, how do you do it? And if you can't explain that, then you probably shouldn't be a coach, right? So good athletes end up becoming coaches. Good shooters end up becoming coaches. Well, some of them do.
I was going to say some of the best athletes are some of the worst coaches.
Because they don't know how they do what they do.
Exactly right.
And the students are asking the wrong questions. They're asking like, hey, what shoes do you wear? What receiver gloves do you wear? What do you, all this stuff. They never ask,
That's
hey,
so true.
what do you say in your head before you catch a ball? To keep your mind on that ball, what do you say in your head? That question is very rarely ever, if ever, asked of them.
Mm-hmm. And they probably wouldn't know how to answer it if they asked it.
Because they never blueprinted how they do what they do. So that was like when I went into the Philadelphia Phillies pitching team. I'm like, what's a mound visit sound like for you coaches? And it was crickets.
Really?
It was crickets.
Interesting. Like
so
they didn't.
There was 10 pitching coaches in that room. All the major leaguers were in there. All the top roster guys.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and they're looking at the coaches, and the coaches are looking at them. I'm like, we're just going to sit here till somebody pipes up, right? So the one coach says, well, I have to go out there and ask them how they're feeling. Okay, what do they tell you? Well, sometimes they say they're feeling good. Sometimes they say they're feeling bad. I said, that's a kind of a worthless conversation. And,
I'm just checking in on you.
Yeah.
I want to see how you're doing out here.
The players started laughing. I'm like, okay, guys, somebody explain to me how you do what you do. Crickets.
No one could do it.
There was one guy, and he's probably the best pitcher in Major League Baseball, and he's the only one that could tell me what he said and when he says it. All the rest of them are dealing on talent alone.
Yeah.
And therefore they have good days and bad days.
Mm-hmm.
So I taught them the mental game equation, thoughts aren't thinking, open and closed loop control systems, all these things, and it just changed. It changed what a mound visit sound like. It changes how the pitchers do what they do. If they encounter a problem, they know instantly how to fix it by plugging it into the mental game equation. They know the difference between open and closed loop control systems, so they know when they can fix a pitch and when they cannot within one pitch, right? So it's very eye-opening for people to get this information. And it just makes for more effective coaching and more effective playing, right?
So how did you counsel the pitching coaches in terms of that mound visit? What are they, going out there now and saying? Are they basically saying, what are you telling yourself? What's your conversation with yourself? What are you thinking like as you're pitching right now? Or what's that mound visit sound like right now?
The pitcher's able to now blueprint how they do what they do.
Right.
And one of the pitchers even said, hey, what do you mean get loud in your head?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I looked at the coaches. I'm like, why is he asking me that question? When's the last time that he was on the mound in a bullpen and there was 10 other pitchers standing around the mound yelling at them while they are pitching? They're like, well, we don't do that. I'm like, well, then he doesn't get any reps in getting loud in his head. Therefore, he doesn't know what he says and when he says it, right? So now when a pitcher knows that if he has a coiling problem or a reaching his foot problem or whatever, they know what words they say and when they say it. They relay that information to the coach through commentary skill building, right? So now the pitcher is actually talking out loud as they pitch. So the coach knows that they're keeping their conscious mind out of the forward motion of the arm and into the hips or wherever it needs to be, right? So each pitcher has their own blueprint for specific pitches. The coach has to understand and know that information. Then the mound visit sounds completely different. Hey, man, are you saying coil when you lift your leg? Oh, coach, I forgot. Okay, let's get back to the blueprint. It's very poignant now. You have something to go on. You have this base of knowledge now of how you do what you do.
And were they receptive to that? I mean, It sounds like they were.
Yeah, it was. They were, because it was just like, who is this guy? Like, I came in there, I was introduced as a shooting instructor.
They're like, why is this shooting instructor talking to us? Right.
But when I started, I didn't even tell him who I was. I mean, there was a guy that introduced me, but then he's like, take it away, Joel. I'm like, what's a mound visit sound like? Right. So
they're all like, who is this guy? Right.
Yeah. So
did they start calling you Yoda by the end of the day?
No, but it's fascinating for me to go into these other realms that I'm not used to. But as long as I know the problem, because I know the mental game equation, I know open and closed loop control system, thoughts aren't thinking, the ultimate skill of the human being, those 4 pillars, because we know those things now, it's just a completely different approach to how you coach.
Yeah, that's wild. So let me ask you this question: has there been anyone, like, you don't have to give a name, I just, like, basically in general kind of wondering, have there been any outspoken critics against the process that are fairly well known? Does anybody just go, that's just not right, but that's not a thing?
Nobody that has really dove into the process is even able to say that. I have critics. They're like, Turner, your way is not the only way. I'm like, it ain't my way. It's just how your brain works. Take it or leave it, right? So, of course, there's going to be critics and haters and this and that, but not very many, because it's pretty tough to deny how your brain works. And that's all I've done is I've packaged different sciences. People are like, well, what's the science? Well, it's the science of neurolinguistic programming. It's the science of open and closed loop control systems. It's the science of visual proprioception. Look it up, right? Those things had never been packaged into shooting, and now it's just gone just way beyond that.
So, I mean, you're a guy who teaches people how to master, like, their process, right? Is there anything that rattles you anymore, or can you pretty much use this to get through anything? And I'm not talking about shooting, I'm talking about anything.
Yeah, I mean, I've been shot at, so there's not much above that. So, when people are dealing with problems, I'm like, well, nobody's shooting at you, so you got that going for you. Right?
Which is nice.
Which is just a perspective that I was able to get through being a cop for almost 21 years, right?
Sure.
So not everybody has the opportunity to be shot at. I highly recommend it. I don't recommend you get hit, but it will certainly change your perspective on your problems, right?
So if someone were to film your practice sessions, what are some things that you do that might surprise people, or that people might look at and go, why is he doing that? Yeah.
So, like, in big tournaments, like, you asked me if something rattles me, and I do shake more when I shoot big indoor tournaments like Vegas and Lancaster and such.
Understandable.
First spring ends, I shake. My bow arm feels a little weak. Cool. I use it now, right? So in my practice sessions, especially my practice arrows, like in Vegas, you get 2 practice ends. So you get two ends of 2 minutes where you can basically shoot as many arrows as you got into the target just for practice. Well, what you will see me doing that's different than everybody else that I see out there is I will shoot those practice arrows while standing on 1 foot.
Every time?
Not every time, but most of my practice arrows are shot off of 1 foot. And people are like, Turner, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I am practicing shooting on 1 foot so that I see a bigger aim, so that my mind gets drawn into the aim and I get reps in pulling it out. My mind gets drawn into balance, because that's all natural stuff, right? My mind gets drawn into balance, like, hey, stupid, you're going to fall over. You got to put your foot down. Cool. I'll put my foot down. I'll pick it right back up while at full draw still. because I'm getting reps and getting loud with the right words at the right moment so I can get through my trigger no matter what aim I'm seeing, right? So most people are just shooting on the line, trying to shoot as many X's as possible and practice making sure that everything's good. I know everything's good as far as impact points go. I know that I'm about to shake more than normal. So I just invite it now. Like now when I get the full draw on my first scoring arrow, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. But now when I see that little shaking, I'm like, that ain't near as bad as what I just did, right? While I was standing on one foot.
Yeah.
So like my practice sessions, I run and shoot. I do push-ups and shoot. I do squats and shoot. I do a cold plunge and shoot. I'm just getting reps, right? Getting reps and getting loud. I shoot my bow a lot. It's pretty much what I do.
Do you count? Like, do you keep a clicker to keep,
No.
like, you don't count, you just know you shoot a lot?
I know it's hundreds of arrows a day.
Hundreds a day?
Yeah.
Dang, I wish I had time to do hundreds a day.
Yeah.
I shoot, like, I love it. I always tell people it's the only time in my life where I don't think about anything else. Where it doesn't matter what's going on with work. It doesn't matter what's going on with anything else. It's the only time in my day where that's the only thing I think about. And it's freaking amazing.
Yeah. And it's, you can't, like I said before, you can't control the volume of your thoughts. Any problem is nothing more than an increase in the volume of thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Use it for reps and increasing the volume of your thinking, which is your voice, and it's got to be the loudest one in the room. So, archery is just such a perfect medium for concentration practice. That's what we use it for. And that's how we were able to figure out so much other stuff, right? Like it seems to be the tippy top. So when people give me their problem, I'm like, oh, okay, that's not near as bad as, trying to work yourself through a shot with a longbow.
So when you're doing the 1 foot stuff and all that kind of stuff, I mean, essentially what you're doing is you're trying to trigger thoughts so that you can reel those back with your thinking, right?
I'm manually increasing the volume of my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm taking in adversity that increases the volume of your thoughts.
Yeah.
Right? I'm taking it in. I'm inviting it. Come, hey, sometimes I'm on the range. I'm like, hey, watch this. They're like, who the hell is this guy? I'm like, bring your camera over here. You're going to want to film this. Right. So, and I do that to add pressure to myself. Right. Because now you just talked a little crap. So now you got to actually perform.
Do you ever do that in a hunting situation? Do you ever put yourself in a position like that? Like, obviously not if you're after a big bull or something like that, but do you ever put yourself in a situation with pigs or with something like that where you might, create additional stressors or do things that kind of, almost like standing on 1 foot, but not, is there anything like that you do like that in the field?
No, not necessarily, because I don't want to be, ethically dealing with, not shooting a good arrow on a game animal. But I mean, game animals are biologically, the tippy top of concentration. To control yourself on a game animal shot for the shot wise, to control yourself is, it's very powerful. When you do it, you're like, okay, this is what I said. This is when I said it. This is exactly how I did that. That is the information that mankind has been looking for since we began shooting stuff.
Yeah. But that's why, if you've got someone who's done really well, shot a lot of animals, been very on point with their accuracy, and then all of a sudden starts falling apart, it's pretty much the same thing that we've been talking about, right? They were just kind of, everything was on autopilot and it was working until it wasn't.
Right. Until the until the subconscious made them so efficient that they didn't quite get their pin on that one before they punched the trigger. Like, oh man, what happened? And then it's just a spiral because now they're starting to put their conscious mind in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now they start talking to their aim, right? Come on, get steady. I used to be so steady, right? And then they start talking to their release aid. Come on, go off, right? And when it doesn't, they're like, screw it. Bah!
Bam.
Punch that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this spiral. That's why it's so powerful, again, to, you may have done it in the past, but because you didn't blueprint how you did it, you are destined to fail in the future. right?
Yeah.
Especially if there's any mystery in your shot, it will come out when it's the biggest buck or the biggest bull or whatever. Your efficiency is going to skyrocket, and you're not going to get the shot that you want. You may even, I hear lots of stories about people blacking out. It took me 13 years to kill a bull elk with my bow.
Yeah, I remember you
I
listening
know
to you say
all about blacking out and not knowing, when I drew my bow or what happened. How'd that arrow end up way over there, right? So just a nightmare until I actually got control of myself.
Yeah, that's wild. So talk a little bit about because I'm not, this is no promotional thing, but I'm shooting that Stan clicker thumb button release. And you were part of the development of that, right?
Yes, sir.
So talk a little bit about why you thought that was something that was needed. And then, now that, you're not doing pull, you're kind of working to the click. Can you just talk through like A, why you thought that was needed, and then B, why is that kind of release better for the thought process that we're training potentially?
Okay. So a lot of people, in the professional archery world were shooting with hinges.
Right.
And then you would see them go to a thumb button and they'd shoot phenomenal. And then they're back to their hinge. I'm like, why are they shooting their hinge again? Well, when I interviewed a lot of these people, they're like, well, I get a little punchy when I get my thumb button. Then when I do get a little punchy, I go back to my hinge. Well, why is that, right? And it's not just the click, but the movement on the hinge is easier to control because it's a bigger movement. But the click, if used in a certain way, was highly beneficial to increasing your presence. And that's what they felt, but there wasn't any thumb buttons on the market that had a click in them at the time. So I'm like, well, why is there no thumb button with a click in it? Why can't we figure this out? So I went to one release aid company like, wow, we had that idea 2 years ago. I'm like, okay, where is it? Well, we're going to maybe do it. And this was a couple of years ago. So we're going to maybe do it in 2025. I'm like, well, that's too far away. So I went to another release company and they're like, oh, that's a good idea. And they had already made releases with clicks in them, but not thumb buttons.
Right. And
I'm like, okay. They're like, yeah, that's a good idea. Nothing. Then I finally went to Stan. I'm like, hey, here's the idea. Here's why you want to click in your release, because it sets the preload at the same exact place. You can use the travel to the click to consciously pull yourself out of the aim. The click is now a presence point, right? So all these cool things are happening, and we want adjustable travel to the click. So if you need more time pulling yourself out of the aim, if you need it to be a more conscious movement, you can increase the travel distance. You can increase the tension. You can decrease the tension, whatever you need. And they're like, well, that's a good idea. They had it built in 3 hours.
You're kidding me.
They had it built in 3 hours. I was talking directly to the engineer. He's like,
yeah, we can do that.
I think I know exactly how to do that. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Right. So they next day aired me the prototype. I'm like, okay. And Bodie at the time was a hinge shooter, and he didn't trust himself shooting a thumb button because, at the time he was, younger than he is now, but he was like, well, this guy, he didn't trust this. And nobody was trusting in the fact of how they did what they did, because they're all just trying to fixing a mental problem with mechanical means with this hinge, right?
Yeah.
Pulling on a hinge was kind of the original shot control device, right? Pulling on a hinge. But that's not how it goes off. It has to hinge. It has to rotate to actually go off, right? But people were pulling, and they were shooting decent scores with it. But now that we started to figure out that you just have to minimize input, now instead of pulling on a hinge, you just roll your fingers on a hinge, right? You roll to the click, that sets up the motor program, and then you simply increase that. You can relax your index finger and increase pressure on your ring and pinky. That will rotate the release after the click, and it fires. I'm like, man, wouldn't that be cool if you put that in a thumb button? So now you draw back an aim. Once the aim is complete, then you press to the click. That sets up the pressing motor program, right? It's your practice swing at your shot activation movement. And then you simply increase pressure again, slow enough you could stop it after the click, right? So you can go open loop to the click, closed loop after the click. And it's a phenomenal system.
So when you're shooting that, because I actually started shooting that this winter, all the other thumb button releases, you were, putting pressure on the thumb button and then you were pulling through, right, to get it to release. This one, you're squeezing down as opposed to pulling through, right?
Because you can do either. You can do it any way you want to do it. But if you're truly utilizing the release as it was designed, you are pressing, and it's kind of pinky to thumb.
Yeah.
Pressing to the click. Here I go. And then it's same motor program down the same neural pathway, right? So you're just increasing pressure with your thumb and your pinky, bringing those two together. And that's what fires the release.
And do you need any kind of a follow through with that? Like when you're doing that, are you just done right here? Because you're not. Like, have you seen any kind of difference in accuracy if you squeeze and then follow through afterwards or not?
There's follow through is not a movement.
You don't even need it.
Something that happens, right? So
it happens if you're pulling,
right? If it happens when you're squeezing as well, because you have to maintain a static pressure to hold the bow apart. And then this thing goes off as a surprise. Boom! That wrist will still break down and it will still go backwards. It's not just
that makes sense.
Just went dink and nothing moves. That means that you had pre-ignition movements linked to your trigger motor program. Because the release is gonna go back. It's gonna the wrist will break down and it will go back. So you see, even people that punch triggers have this follow through. Book, right? Boop, it's the same, but their wrist doesn't break down. It goes and stays there. That's how you know that they're command shooting instead of actually shooting with.
So that's a good point. So so you're really looking, when you do that, you're looking for the wrist to break down afterwards?
Yep.
I've never heard that sense. So go back through that.
I got that from George Riles. This was, I didn't really know that, and George taught me that. That's what we're looking for. When you have a surprise break with almost any release aid, the wrist will break down. Even if it's an index finger, boom, it'll break down.
Why is that?
Well, you're just keeping your wrist fairly relaxed, and you are maintaining tension. And when that thing goes off, you just see it kind of folds a little bit.
I gotcha.
I guess I can't explain all the biomechanics of that, but I'm sure there are people that can.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I just know that's what I'm looking for. Like if you watch videos of Bodie shooting or whatever, you'll see that.
You're looking for the wrist. Gotcha. Yeah. So if you could pick one trait, mental or physical, let me back up. If you could build the best shot out there, which it may just be Bodie, what are the main characteristics of a shooter that are like, hey, if I was going to build a shooter, this is what I would put in that person?
Well, I would, a calm mind to start with, right? Not an analytical, high tension person, I guess. Not that we have choices in that when we're born, but if I was building the ultimate shooter, which I think we may have done.
I was going to say, I probably answered my own question because you probably already built him.
Well, the main thing with that though is no matter what, when they start out, like we started Bodie on a tension activated release, a resistance release at the age of 3. Because the first time I put an index finger trigger in his little hand, he punched the crap out of it. Why wouldn't he? That's natural.
Right.
And he had pre-ignition movements linked to his trigger motor program. But what are you going to teach a 3-year-old, right? Just give him a resistance release, teach him how to use it. Okay, you got to push the safety in, you pull your bow back. And, if they forget to push the safety in, they go dunk, and the arrow flies out of their bow just a little ways. No big deal, right? Like, hey, man, you got to push the safety in. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Okay. Push the safety in, draw back and aim. And then once your aim's done, take the safety off and then just pull. Right? It gets them to mechanically separate from the aim. That's the main thing you're trying to do. Man, I see so many kids and so many parents and so many coaches stuck in the physicality of it. And these kids get super frustrated and then they leave the sport. There's no reason for it.
So does Bodie shoot that clicker now? What does he shoot?
He is actually shooting an old Stan shoot off, which is,
know what that is.
Predecessor to the OnneX system.
Okay.
And what we found some different loop release angles and such that are slightly more accurate with that shoot off system. It doesn't have a click in it, but Bodie doesn't need the click anymore.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to work the trigger closed loop no matter what. So we've really minimized the input in his shot. Like, his trigger is scary light. But you see that he doesn't even put his thumb on it until after his aim is complete. Mm-hmm. And his aim is done very quickly, right? So he gets that aim on there. Then you'll see him lay his thumb on that thing very lightly, and then he's just working very slight pressure. Even pressure, boom, until it breaks. Very minimal input in Bodie's shot now, and that's the way that archery has gone. That's why the level of archery is where it is today. It's through the roof compared to 4 years ago. It's through the roof now.
Yeah, it is crazy. Like the way people are shooting now, it's wild.
Right.
Do you ever have a time, Joel, where do you ever have a time anymore, whether it's in a tournament or whether it's in the field, that you ever find yourself going open loop and the system breaks down on you? Like, do you ever fail anymore, or are you always able to autocorrect?
Yeah, I'm able to autocorrect. Like, I've been through enough of that. Right? I spent my lifetime shooting out of control, and on December 14th, 2014, I made a vow to myself that I will not shoot an uncontrolled arrow.
Yeah.
They're not all going to hit the middle. Sometimes I have a collapse, but it's not because I didn't get through my trigger closed loop, right? I'm just not doing that anymore. But everybody's got their turning point. There's a point at which you're going to become frustrated enough to be like, I'm not doing it like this anymore, right? Maybe you miss a big buck. Maybe, you lose a tournament, whatever. Everybody's got their turning point. And some people, I guess, never hit it, and they just keep going through life with mediocre shooting, and they're good with that. And I'm cool with that. Fine, right? But if you want to reach another level, you're going to have to hit a turning point, because if you're punching a trigger, for most people, there's some good command shooters out there, obviously. But for most people, that's not going to get it. Their pre-ignition movements are too big.
So what do you say to the guy who buys into the system? He's working at it and he's really struggling, training with it every day, and just is really having a hard time. Any tips for that person just kind of continuing down the path and continuing to get better?
Yeah, I just instantly, I have them send me a video of them shooting while talking out loud. And I know I sound like a broken record with that, but that's where the problems usually lie. When you stop talking, you stop thinking. When you stop thinking, you stop the override, and the subconscious will instantly take it from you. That's natural.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, if people come to my clinics, like, you don't leave my clinic without being in total control of your shot and understanding how you do what you do. And so when it's the online course, people have the ability to comment and ask me questions. And if there's somebody that's just really struggling with it, then I give them my phone number and they call me and we hash it out. And that's usually, 99% of the time, I'm like, when's the last time you shot while talking out loud? Well, I did that a couple times and then I quit doing that. Yeah, well, you didn't get to the point where your conversation was easy.
That's a great point. So that's a great way, I think. It's been about an hour and 5 minutes. I want to make sure I honor your time. But I think it's important for people. Where do people find your clinic schedule? Is that, and also your online training program? Is that on the website, your Instagram page, all of it, or like where?
Yeah, so it's, I usually, if I'm doing a clinic, I'll usually post it on my Instagram. I don't have a schedule that I put on my website because a lot of times people request these clinics and they have a certain group of people that they want to get the clinic. If that clinic doesn't fill up, then I'll usually put it out on the interwebs. But
do you have an email list or anything that you send that stuff out to that people can sign up for? Or is it pretty much Instagram is the place to keep their eye on?
Instagram is pretty much where I do, if I need to advertise something, it's Joel Turner Actual. Shot IQ Marketing is a fake account that was created by somebody. Don't send things to Shot IQ Marketing. Please report it as it's not me. I am Joel Turner Actual on Instagram. ShotIQ.com is my website for all things in shooting, right? I've got online courses in archery, rifle, pistol. I've also got a Mind IQ course that is for sports and how to gain control of your mind in just about anything that you do. And if you want to hear some more of my story, I've got a really cool website called turnermodel.com, and that kind of shows our story and how we came to be.
That's awesome stuff. I appreciate you jumping on with me, Joel. Thanks very much, man.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Appreciate it.